Late in the afternoon of May 7th, Grant issued orders for Meade to proceed south. If his overall plan for victory is to work, the Army must remain on. For the first time, all Union armies are operating as a cohesive unit in order to crush. Bridges will to fight. Ability. Grant intends to squeeze the very life out of the rebels by cutting off their supplies, and to leave them helpless, alone, by silencing communication with the Army in Richmond. General Grant is unbeatable. General. The march to Spotsylvania is lengthy. The monotony of trudging mile after mile in the dust heard by those who leave the way. The discomfort of sweltering under a blazing sun. The pain of taking one more step in boots that have no soles. These are things one can't fully understand. It's experiencing. No. Despite the prospect of a grueling march, so close on the heels of a battle that surely must have claimed more lives than the Chancellor, Meade's army responded to the news that they would press on to Pennsylvania in an unprecedented relation. For once, they have not tucked the tail and butt back across the rapid hand. What should have been a clear road south was not ours. General Lee's never General George Anderson dispatched to Spotsylvania on the remote chance that Grant might proceed south rather than retreat. Free his men through the countryside. The march to Spotsylvania became a foot race, with Fitzhugh Lee the victor. He took a position on a rise about 3 miles from the courthouse overlooking Brock Road, a place called Laurel Hill. Yesterday, just after daylight, he sent word to Anderson to join Lee. The Federal Army feared he could not hold the line without reinforcements. Hours before, they had joyously pressed forward, buoyed by the prospect of drawing Lee out into the open for one decisive and final battle. The slow march, riddled with constant skirmishing, took its toll. One could see the despair these tired troops felt as they arrived to see Confederate reinforcements take their place at Laurel Hill. One did not realize that the additional troops were infantry. He wrongly assumed that only Fitzhugh Lee's cavalry faced him, and impetuously ordered John Robinson's 2nd Division of 5th Corps to attack the line. The requested time to organize his men. One's impatience ruled the day. The ensuing assault against Brigadier General Benjamin Humphrey's Mississippi Brigade, Brigadier General Joseph B. Kershaw's South Carolina Brigade, met forceful resistance. The Federal Army charged the Confederate position over open ground. In result, back. seemed not to notice the futility of their attempt. He had one objective: to get to Spotsylvania. He urged his men forward, exhorting them to clear the road. Heavy Confederate shelling smote there. They lost critical speed and force each time they fired. Lines disintegrated. Columns fell into disarray. Union troops had progressed to within 15 yards of the Confederate bulwark. Were forced to fall back. Robinson, who so gallantly led his own forward, his certain defeat, was wounded. His men so badly beaten, this regiment knows. And Robinson failed. General Charles Griffin and General Joseph Bartlett hoped to succeed. He was close, didn't see. The hand they grabbed. It appeared they might take the hit. But this organization, if there were a battle, all too clear, no one was following. Early out there, both sides were spent. Died in the battle. General won the Spanish message. I've done my best. I can't attack again. That was tired. Out of ammunition. I think that if I leave the enemy alone, to leave the enemy. If he had been acting alone, probably would have succeeded to the Confederate strength. Even though the Army of the Potomac is under Meade's command, becoming increasingly apparent that directions coming from Grant, Meade is not in instant. As the Confederate line expanded throughout the afternoon, Grant anxiously planned the next assault. Could Corps never be able to launch another attack on them. So he sent John Sedgwick's 6th as reinforcements. He hoped the combined strength of the sufficient to break the Confederate line. It was battle raged fervently. Rebels held their ground. Exhausted for the moment defeated, Union Army would move well to the rear where they started. More than 1,700 men of the Army of the Potomac died at Laurel Hill yesterday. One might say that when compared to other battles and other death tolls, that figure is not so high. After all, Antietam claimed more than 7,000, both North and South, before all was said and done. It was the single bloodiest day of the war so far. That was one day. Since May 5th, nearly 30,000 men have been lost. Seems to be fully in.
General Warren is a high-strung individual. His troops have been delayed by Confederate cavalry. They arrive and they Kershaw's South Carolinians filing into position in the edge of the woods at the crest in front of the Spindle Field. Warren does not wait for other troops to come up. Lead division, commanded by John Cleveland Robinson, man with the best beard of any senior officer in the Army of the Potomac, turns to General Robinson and directs Robinson to attack. Robinson's men poured off the Block Road, up the slopes, toward the position held by Kershaw's people. Kershaw's people are in position, beginning to entrench, and now that war has become a war in which a soldier marches with a rifle in one hand and a trenching tool in the other. Troops storm forward and are repulsed. And the Brigade of Maryland are chewed up. There you go, the monument beginning where they reach. Well, undaunted, what has happened? Next it will be Griffin, then Pepper, and then Crawford. In succession, Confederates strengthen their position. About the time more troops arrive, roll back. And they will not stand the Confederates have won the race up many corrals and roll back. First Union frost. Right there, don't worry. Ladies and gentlemen, back to the kind of Each waited for the other to make the first move. For a day, quiet. One does not expect death when the battlefield is still. That is why the news that Major General John Sexton had been killed by a Confederate sniper so stunned the Union command, especially General Grant, who had just spoken to Explorer Commander minutes earlier. There is no more task than patrolling the front lines, routine yet dangerous. 2 days ago, as General Sedgwick strolled around the front, he noticed some of his men flinching, Confederate musket balls flying overhead. Typical cockiness approached them and asked why they dodged the bullet. They could not hit an elephant at this distance.
Sedgwick should never have underestimated Confederate marksmanship. For the last words fell silent. He fell, struck in the face by a rebel musket. Sedgwick was one of the oldest and most distinguished commanders of Grant's army. Now just the latest to die and one that is planned through many experienced leaders on both sides.
The Confederates got here to help us. Listen to the Union Major General. Listen to these pimps.
Faces to the enemy. Our belief. It's founded in the knowledge that we've done so for our families and our home.
The same God. And pray.
Which they may be exposed. And eat death at the gates of hell. Of the Lord. For still to defend our country and steal our freedom. Amen. Amen.
The bugle show was the weakest point of the Confederate line, pulled from the point and two sides, and made even weaker by the removal on the night of May 11th of the artillery that bolstered its strength. 19,000 Union troops assembled for the assault. Whatever success Grant's army felt in the beginning of the battle, for it has now truly become Grant's army, must have come from the sheer magnitude of the assault force. It did not come from the stupid planning. Even as Brigadier General Francis C. Barlow of Whitfield S. Hancock's 2nd Corps marched to position, readied his men for the first charge against the shoulder-high Confederate breastworks, he was uncertain of his party. His scouts were lost. He had no map. He did not even know how many Confederates awaited his arrival. On the other side of the line, legendary Stonewall Brigade peered across the open field below their position. They had heard their foe approach, the rumors of silence. The scattered clicks of guns, terrible fire, eerily pierced the quiet. Union troops rose out of the fog and mist, storming across the field toward the Confederate position. Many certain that it would be their last heroic effort in this fight. With a confidence more than anyone, Stonewall Brigade turned triggers, waiting for their foes to fall. But nothing did. The Confederate powder was wet, and their guns were Barlow's men penetrated the stadium at the tip. They broke through just as Upton had done 2 days earlier. In the close fighting, they plunged at their enemy bayonets and wielded guns like clubs. Normally civilized men turned into Jackson's brigade, Gus and the men. There were casualties and prisoners of war mounted. The initial success soon gave way to chaos, war, death. Commanding officers lost control of their troops. They were unable to rally the difficulties of fighting. Reinforcements had to. If Union commanders had been able to restore order, it is quite possible Lee would have felt his first decisive faith fall or at least the second. Lee's impatience with his generals was evident. He tried to personally lead his men into battle. The men, however, would not let their hero, the man who to them is the god of battle, Jefferson. Again, they shouted at him for years. The brigades moved forward without him, brandishing pistols, rifles, bayonets, swords. Their resolve stemmed federal time. The moment for clear, decisive victory was gone. Held that the Confederates saved by 9 o'clock in the morning under the eye. 8 blood. Fighting death. These were no longer but monsters, bloodthirsty, vengeful. Neither side was willing to concede. Both sides were determined to hold their position. The fighting that raged for 17 more hours, so intense that musket fire spliced through thick trees. battle. Morning of May 13th, Confederates silently drawn back. All that remained in silence. The rebels called the salient Mule Chute because of its distinctive shape. How the federal army has committed a new bloody act. By either, it forever will be
to the gloom. Confederate pickets hear the path moving toward them. It's been raining hard. Pickets fire. Most of them don't bang. And a mass of men storm over the work. Almost 3,000 Confederates were captured. Allegheny Johnson, the division commander, fell on Stuart. But the Union does not rest in valley. Putting flags, mounting up prisoners, they allow the Confederates to fall. Soon the Confederates were counterattacking. General John Gordon's division, another lead rearing. Ramseur's brigade, Harris's brigade, McGowan's brigade, another lead of the rear. And his pioneers pulling up a line of breastworks along the face of Angle. You'll stand there toe to toe in driving rainstorm from about 6 o'clock in the morning till almost night, fighting from hawk and to hawk, as they call the Confederate rifle pits. Men being pulled over and beaten to death. Men using their bayonets and rifles as spears. Terrible fighting. Finally, Lee receives the welcome news. Men have held. The army will survive. And they fall back. Near the Harrison house. And his company. Folks only count them.
There may be no nobler picture than that of the U.S. cavalry. Dashing a figure as the cavalier upon his steed. Through this campaign, the U.S. cavalry made a negligible contribution. Lacking the mass of its renowned European counterpart, hindered by an untamed natural landscape, and suffering from inadequate training, mounted soldier has failed to fulfill his traditional role of infantry support. Some might say that the only area in which the Union cavalry has been successful is in impeding infantry movement. It has been accepted since early in the war that the Confederate horsemen under the command of the flamboyant General Jeb Stuart could run roughshod with the Federal Army. Now it looks as if that might change. General Philip Sheridan, one of the few men to come east with General Grant, has taken command of the Cavalry Corps. Bringing an infantry background to the post, he is keenly aware of the need for offense and has spent the last weeks honing cavalry tactics. Stewart's corps, on the other hand, is spent. His horses are bedraggled, his riders gone. If ever the Union cavalry is to make a difference, this is it. It is beginning to come into its own. Sheridan's road has not been without obstacles. Twice so far in this campaign, it butted heads with General Lee over the role the cavalry can and must play in order to exact defeat over the Confederate foe. Now, however, he should meet no further resistance from the commander of the Army of the Potomac. On May 9th, General Grant superseded Lee's command and sent Sheridan on a raiding mission to cut rebel communication and railroad lines and to forage Confederate stores. In short, he was to provide the bait to draw Stewart away from the main army and to force him to fight. The two cavalry corps marched south along parallel routes. 6 miles from Richmond, a place called Yellow Tavern, Stewart ordered all but one regiment to dismount and placed a battery on an elevated portion of the road. This was the cavalry positions beside the road.
The other guy was just
Sheridan's troops arrived on the afternoon of May 11th. They stormed the artillery and drove back Stewart's ladder. General George Custer's Michigan Brigade met nearly 80 Confederates and took fire. Charged forward to rally him men. There in the confusion, a dismounted Federal fighter noticed a lone mounted Confederate. Loose pistol, aimed, and fired. Jeff Stewart and Lee Summit fell. Stewart is dead, killed in the line of duty in Yellow Tavern, Virginia. The Southern hero was well known by both sides for his majestic steeds, hat worn with peacock's plume, and for a gray coat lined with red cloth. Now he is gone. Lee will miss the great cavalier, and he says never brought him a false piece of information. His death leaves a great void in the Confederate command, but its lasting effect may be far less tangible. The bullet that felled Stewart also pierced the heart of them. There
All that speed on what's that? Long time first last.
Gotta cross that path.
Recipe.
What's that?
Here's one red left.
Down across the open ground in front of the Confederates. The rebels had dug in, found first claws in front of them. It cost them. The men of the Union front knew that to advance on such a position was to face certain death. Watching them mark their names in their coats, tantamount to watching them mark their own grave. Somber, yet without bitterness. As dawn enveloped cold heart, and a second corps steeled their courage, kept their lines nearing the valley of death. The order came to advance. That dawn, coverage, replaced. Headlong, ran into a heavy, continuous barrage of deadly, active. but it held. As the slaughter continued, he rode to the front to spur immediate action. In the cries of the wounded, blank stares of the dead, deathly person. Undoubtedly, he will regret cold-hearted the rest of his life. The order went out at 1:30 p.m. June 3rd from headquarters of the Army of the Potomac. Present, all further offensive operations suspended. There may be no better way to drive this battle that took so many lives than with the diary entry of a soldier shot as he tried to advance on the Confederate entrenchment. June 3rd, Cold Harbor. I died. Early in this campaign, Grant reportedly chided his officers for worrying too much about Lee, about what Lee would do to them. Instead, he admonished them, worry about what you will do to Lee. One wonders if he is worrying now, or if he at least understands his opponent better than he did 6 weeks ago, before he lost 50,000 men and his easy victory evaporated.
Time is running out for me as we enter 1864. First is large in the time of Civil War who were not in the convenience of the government. Put in for a 2-year enlistment, for out the day of enlistment, even if you were in the South and done. So a number of enlistments of the 2- and 3-year regiments will run out. More important, Mr. Lincoln is going to have to submit his policies to the approval of all. If the war is not going well on an election day in November, Mr. Lincoln is thrown out of office, and a new president undoubtedly will win on a platform of lack of competence, ability of the administration to win the war, will look toward a vision of nation permanently think one of the interesting, strange, unexplainable things about this Army was why one asked how we believe the Army was never was examine man which had a total power as and by the same time, I've been asked many times, how do we fight yourself? I don't know. That's a very definite change in the way the war is fought starting in 1864. The idea that we are not necessarily going to stand out in the open and just fight blindly because of our enemies, that really doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. And for Lee's army and for Grant's army, it just changes the whole way the wars are fought.
By the night of the 20th and 21st, France ready to redig on the message he sent back to the President. And I propose to fight it out on this fine and peaceful, checkmated and fun. France makes it
that night, he sees the men looking at the lining of their boat. He speculates that they're picking lights out. He looks closer. They are pinning their names in the gold lining. The water election on himself made him no dog tag. And the soldiers relied on the general do not. And it's going to be died. The attack begins. Union troops storm forward on Barlow's front. A breakthrough momentarily as they punch a hole after 3 Confederate guns, 3 cannon along Lincoln. Gibbons' men get up on the march. Other Union troops go forward. Pitch in is the order. Pitch in. Pay no attention to the left and right. Law says we're knocking them down like you knock down a row of dominoes. Confederates can see the dust as the bullets strike the Confederate uniform. And when the 18th Corps is ordered to renew an attack, when the officer says, if Jesus Christ ordered the attack, it was not good. These soldiers, old man, I don't think anyone today knows exactly and step out of the trench or like to say what it is. One, what is the heart, and one, don't come a little way. Well, I don't know, I don't do it. To walk on the ground, now, if I call her brown, so hard, I think what you're supposed to do, what you buy. Seriously, you take an action, whatever it happens, it's not breaking the ground, someplace to hide. That's the first place to follow, and to go fly around and go down. Otherwise, it's not small. And even if back there, commanders are still talking. They're saying, okay, get up, let's do it again. Soldiers on the front line for the first time say, no. No, this is not good. Wrong. I'm not doing this. Some of them roll over on their back and fire the buses in the air because they're all going, fire. They all fire. So the fight is over. The fight is out. The commanders of the Army of the Potomac had protected these soldiers. That's simple. Men like Joe Burke and Brian Side. That central to a commander is the man the command of the Army. Can't help it except for the Grand Life. The Grand continues to push. Made a terrible mistake in Cold Harbor. Okay, that's done. This is not just boys just play on going out and running around on a battlefield in front. There's something profoundly wrong and a culture of laws. Civil War is not a tradition. This is our country. There are people here who have grandparents and fought in the war. We are not that far removed from what we did. This is a single blooded chapter of American history. And listen, I'm not saying we should try and exploit the war or destroy it. But remember, pay attention to what these soldiers are trying to do with authenticity. Armament, the formation, the ground, and what it is they're trying to keep alive. They're not trying to keep alive the horror of this book. They're trying to remind us of what we should pay attention to.
Nevertheless, in the actual resignation that the United States negotiated was a dollar with Mexico, Southwest, and California for done. The war field and training grounds for American officers later fought on both sides and Cuba. It was also a political departure. Criticized the Democratic administration as being informed and protected. With the conclusion of the Mexican War, the United States gained a vast new territory.